Hello and welcome to the program. This is Moneyline with me, Nancy Naji. Thank you all for joining us again today. Today on the program we have a very special guest. I must say, a very special one at that. You will be watching the interview that I had just a couple of hours ago with the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia, Madam Monica Geingos. She is the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia. Just before she assumed the role in 2015, she has extensive corporate experience, about 15 years as a businesswoman. We actually did speak on a lot of issues. Don't forget that the First Lady of Namibia, with the President of Namibia, contracted COVID-19 just a few months ago. I did ask her questions on that and what she thinks about vaccination as well as vaccine access, among other issues plaguing Africa and perhaps women. Just take a listen to the special interview with Monica Geingos, the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia.
So let me start with the first question, because the question of COVID. We're glad that the president and you, of course, have recovered from COVID-19. How do you think that Africa has handled this COVID-19 pandemic and the issue about vaccine access? What is your message for Africans who are adverse to taking the vaccine?
Who are what, the vaccine?
Yes. Yes. What is your message to Africans that are adverse, that are vaccine hesitant?
So there's two conversations. There's the conversation of accessibility of vaccine, and there's the conversation of vaccine hesitancy. And I think the conversation of accessibility and availability of vaccine, to me, is a bit more important, because how do you assess hesitancy if you don't have sufficient vaccine in the country? You don't have options for people to choose from. If in the rural areas, we also may be struggling for distribution. So I think we need to fix this whole vaccine apartheid where Africa has really struggled. Even the African countries like Namibia, who can pay for vaccine, to access vaccines timeously. And once the vaccines arrive, to make sure that they are distributed across the country, and then that we mitigate the misinformation that has seeped through from the West that causes the vaccine hesitancy. So my message to anybody who has available vaccine is the only way that we can get out of this quagmire that COVID has caused for us is to vaccinate.
Mm-hmm. How do you think would you handle that vaccine access? Because a lot of talk around we should be able to produce a vaccine in Africa. What do you think?
So there's a number of things, including patents, financial resources, skills. So if we were producing many vaccines before COVID, then this would be an easier discussion. Mm-hmm. I think it's a wake-up call that we do need to be a little bit more self-reliant. I mean, given how many vaccines our continent requires, it is an outstanding conversation why we're not producing from our side. But we can't pretend as if the global pharmaceutical companies have ensured a level playing field where it was easy for the continent to do that. So I fully support the African heads of states who are speaking about TRIPS waivers, for instance. It's critical. So I think sometimes when we have these conversations, we're very hard on ourselves as Africans, but we're not interrogating enough the global inequities that exist in public health care. And I think COVID has given us an opportunity to take a cold, hard look, not only at ourselves and some of the things that we should have been doing around our healthcare, but also about how global healthcare generally views and treats Africa.
You know that this COVID pandemic has caused a lot of economic setbacks, you know, not just for developed nations. The effects are even more devastating for developing countries that we have in Africa. Namibia has a population of close to 3 million people now, of which over 50% are women. How do you think that this pandemic and the resultant fall, perhaps in commodity prices such as diamonds, which Namibia is blessed with, has affected women?
So for context, we as Namibia experienced the commodity downturn already from around 2016. So if I remember correctly, we already started seeing a contraction in our economy in 2016. Actually, I think it was 0% growth in 2016. 2017, it was -1%. Come 2018, Nancy, what we started to see, there were these green shoots of our economy coming to recovery out of a recession that was exacerbated by a drought. Come 2019, disaster strikes. As our economy was starting to pull itself out of a recession, COVID hits us. Our 2020 stats are that we've seen the biggest contraction in our economy since independence 31 years ago. So it's catastrophic for us economically, and there's a long path to economic recovery. But what this means for women, and again, let's take a step back. The position of a woman in a recession, whether it's triggered by a commodity downturn, whatever it's triggered by, commodity downturns, economic recessions, they result in increased levels of violence towards women. Domestic violence goes up, gender-based violence in general goes up in times of economic recession. Now imagine an economic recession that was triggered by a commodity downturn and an extensive drought that is exacerbated by a public health crisis as severe as COVID, which caused lockdowns. What that means for women from a personal safety perspective is that every single crime in a country like Namibia during our lockdown went down. The only crime that went up was sexual violence, rape specifically. Domestic violence went up. So the personal safety of women and the trauma that accompanies that is unquantifiable. It's also not something that you get over in a year or 2 years. Any person who has experienced sexual violence, domestic violence, the trauma that comes with it, that's something that you live with, that you have to deal with. And there are economic consequences attached to that. Further than that, when we go into the economic sphere, we must look at the kind of roles that women play generally. So normally in countries, especially in our countries, women are the ones with employment and economic livelihoods that are not secure. In a time of lockdown, it's the woman on the side of the street selling roasted meat who can't trade her wares. It is the woman who's a domestic worker who can no longer go to her employer's house because the government has declared a strict lockdown and no place of employment can operate. If you look at unemployment and people being laid off from their jobs, a woman has double jeopardy there. If it's not her being laid off from her employment, it's her husband. And if he's laid off and he doesn't know how to deal with his pressures of being unemployed, her personal safety, we go back to the issue of gender-based violence, because again, we know these are the triggers. So it's so multifaceted about how this affects us. We know of women who had to leave their employment in order to play caregiving roles for partners who were ill and continue to be ill because of the long effects of COVID. So I think the setback that COVID has for women is unquantifiable going forward. What it's done for our place in the workplace, what it's done to our purse, our collective purse, and our economic livelihood is quite severe.
With what you've just said, are there some specific steps that perhaps Namibia has taken with respect to perhaps gender equality in the economic space, educational, political sphere, for example? Are there some specific steps? And perhaps
Yes.
also other steps that were taken even during the lockdowns to help ameliorate the sufferings of perhaps women?
So government really did a lot there. So there was what they called a stimulus and relief package, which amounted to about 8.1 billion. And I'm trying to quickly quantify that in my head, what that means in US dollar terms. That's probably about 8.1 billion is about 550 million US dollars. Which was directed to businesses, households, and trying to also do cash acceleration. So what government then did is they would then start paying entrepreneurs quicker. They would start paying VAT refunds quicker. So there was quite a lot that government tried to do to give support to entrepreneurs, to households. There was economic stimulus and relief packages for the business sector, particularly those in productive economic activities, like tourism. I'm trying to think of all the things. There were wage subsidies for hardest hit sectors, so that these sectors could avoid retrenching their employees, particularly again in the tourism, hospitality, travel, aviation, construction sectors. There was also the accelerated payments of overdue and undisputed VAT refunds, where they sped that up. That was about 3 billion. I don't want to do the translations, but I think if you want to do the translation, it's about 14.5. Namibian dollar is equivalent to the South African rand. So you can probably get an idea of the quantum. They also accelerated payments that were due to the suppliers of goods and services to government. You'd think these are small numbers, but it's big numbers. And in a way, I think we shouldn't allow the invoices of entrepreneur and businesses who provide goods and services to government to pile up, or VAT refunds to pile up, because that's money that's sitting in the fiscus that should be out in the economy. And I think COVID taught us the lesson: pay people what is due to them quickly, who've supplied you or who you owe VAT to, because that way you have more money circulating in the economy. Our development bank also provided 500 million concessional loans at good rates to the agricultural sector, particularly the small businesses there. There was another loan scheme as well to help out cash-strapped farmers who were also struggling to pay off their loans for their farms. There was policy relief to borrowers at most of our big financial institutions, particularly the ones with a developmental focus, which was on a defined period of time, but at least it delayed any immediate crises, let people recapitalize their interest, there was tax loan back schemes for non-mining corporates to provide them some breathing room, the tax-paying businesses in the non-mining sectors. So there was quite a lot done by the government. And you must remember, when we speak about all of these things, we're speaking about a government that was coming out of recession, where the fiscus was significantly harmed, but had to go into whatever it could find in order to assist households and businesses. But there was also some non-financial assistance given, like the relaxation of labor regulations to protect jobs and to avoid these major retrenchments and business closures. There was support to households. The one that I can think of, there was an emergency income grant that was given to individuals and to people who've lost their employment, which was a once-off payment of 750 Namibian dollars to everybody who qualified. This costed the government about 562 million. So there was quite a lot of measures. Were there measures specific to women? I don't recall that, but I do know, for instance, in these kind of subsidies, like the municipalities were supported by a government to have water subsidies, where nobody's water was cut off, people who couldn't pay. These type of things do trickle down for the benefit of women, because often we have a female-led households. The 750 individual grants will trickle down primarily to women, because they were the ones who mostly qualified in the criteria that was provided. So I think that when we deal with crises, we often forget that many, if not all crises, have a gendered nature, and you must be specific in your interventions to cater for the gendered nature of how crises impact different citizens.
Fantastic, ma'am. Let's take a look at even your role as a First Lady. I also do know that Namibian women occupy close to 45% right now of proportion of seats in the National Assembly, and that is a wonderful feat compared to, the median position of some other African countries. Here in Nigeria, is not like that at all. It's not like that at all. We can say at least in our Senate, we have 109 seats. We don't even have up to 50% of women. We don't have 20% of it as women. So
Yeah.
Namibia is a great example of that. But how have you and other women that are occupying these kind of positions encouraged perhaps a younger generation of women or of girls to push for gender parity across all sectors, not really about politics, economics and all of that? Even the boardrooms, we have a lot of women that are not in the boardrooms.
Yes. So that's the interesting part. We're doing so well, and we've been identified as the one country that's doing very well in this type of closing the gender gap. The statistics look fantastic, whether it's from the African perspective or a continental perspective. Even from a legal and a policy perspective, we're doing well. But let me tell you, Nancy, we're doing well in terms of the inclusion of women in the political sphere. There's many things that governments can learn from the private sector, but this is a space where the private sector has to learn from the political space. That here, the political sphere is outperforming our private sector in the empowerment of women. So there is a lag there. So the private sector has to catch up to the exceptional work that government has implemented in making sure that women are provided the same opportunities. One thing that I'm especially pleased from, in both our ruling and our opposition parties, we have a lot of young women under the age of 30. We've got a number in the ruling party and in the opposition parties, a number of young women under the age of 25, for instance. I suspect that Namibia has the youngest female parliamentarian. Her name is Patience Masua,
Yes.
Honorable Patience Masua. She's 22 years old, if I'm not mistaken. Then I also suspect we've got the youngest minister on the continent as well. So she's obviously a parliamentarian, but she's also the deputy minister of ICT. And the opposition also has very dynamic, outspoken, go-getter female parliamentarians. And I think that's a huge credit to where we need to go. But Nancy, I want to point out something as well. The way that Namibia managed to leapfrog other countries in closing the gap with female representation in parliament was not through a decision of the government. It was through the decision of the ruling party that implemented a 50-50 quota system in its parliamentary list when it went to its internal congress. Now, the significance of this, so they then applied not only 50-50, but they also applied zebra, meaning for one man, there must be one woman underneath him. So there would be a list of male candidates, a list of female candidates, and then you take whoever got the highest score on the male list, they come there. Whoever took the highest scores on the female list, they come second. Then the next person who got the highest on the male list comes third, then the next female comes fourth. And that to me was a huge eye-opening experience, how a non-state actor can effect the kind of consequential reform that impacted our parliament so consequentially. So we almost doubled our female representation in parliament as a country because of the actions of one political party, which then begs the question, we should take that example and make it apply across the board to all political parties in the country to adopt the same principles. Because the logic doesn't break between political parties. Women should be given the same opportunity as men. This isn't a political question. This is a question of logic. There is no way that you build a country, there's no way you build a nation when you leave anybody behind, whether it's on the basis of gender, whether it's on the basis of ethnicity, whatever basis. You simply cannot leave any citizen behind when you're building a nation. So I really want us to sit and reflect on how consequential quotas can be in making us speed up to meeting our targets. And I say this intentionally, Nancy, because when we look at the pace of female participation in the workplace and in politics, there has been growth in the last 20 years, but it's so slow that UN Women is calculating that it will take us more than 100 years to reach gender parity. It makes no sense. So obviously we need ways to expedite the time it's taking us to include women. And I think quotas has certainly worked in the Namibian context. And this is how you breathe life into policies. The policies of women empowerment is certainly part of our policies and regulatory space, but it's not often reflected in the realities. And the quota system worked exceptionally well.
Now, as we come to the end of this interview, because we just have a few more minutes, I would like to ask you about your One Economic Foundation, as well as the President's War on Poverty and Inequality in Namibia, and also just to pause there with a pledge in 2020. When I read it, I read you made a pledge to give all your wealth, estimated at $3 million. I don't know if you are wealthier than that now, to charity. So can you speak to me about what influenced that decision? Are you still standing by it, as well as your One Economic Foundation and what the President is doing against poverty?
I've entrenched it into my will, into my estate. So I stand by it. I stand by it because I strongly believe that inheritance is one of the biggest drivers of inequality. And I'm sensitive to this conversation because Namibia is the second most unequal country in the world, second only to South Africa, when it comes to income inequalities. And it's got a lot to do with our shared history of apartheid. And one of the drivers of this inequality is inheritance. So when you have privilege, when I stand at schools to motivate young people in rural areas whose parents have nothing, and I go and tell them, all you need is a good education in order to be successful in life, why should I exempt my own children? Why should I not then give my children a good education and expect them to be successful? So I want to practice what I preach. And I do believe if I can do a couple of things, and if you don't mind, Nancy, I want to take you through them. If I, as a parent, can protect my children from harm, particularly my daughter, to make sure that no harm comes upon me, because I know the toll that trauma has, particularly untreated, undiagnosed trauma on young girls has. I need to protect my child from traumatic events. I need to build their confidence that's associated. That's my role as a parent. I need to make sure they get good education. I need to make sure that they are hardworking and they've got the right attitude towards life. And if I'm telling other people's children that these are the ingredients for success, surely it should apply to my children as well. So I don't want to be someone who inadvertently perpetuates the very system that makes me so deeply uncomfortable. I'm already deeply uncomfortable that there's such a gap between my asset base and that of the average Namibian. how then do I sleep knowing that I'm going to perpetuate it? And in Namibia, it's aggravated by the fact that we don't have an inheritance tax. We don't have a donations tax. We don't have a capital gains tax. So everything that I have will transfer straight to my children, tax-free, without them having done anything in particular to grow the economy. If I'm lucky, my children will be responsible, they'll create businesses, they'll participate in the economy. So to me, it's about, I don't believe that inheritance helps us with inequality. I think it worsens it. And therefore, I don't believe that my children should be inheriting my assets. I think it should go to organizations like the One Economy Foundation, which is in my will, for them to try and bridge the two economies and make sure that the country has more participants in the first economy and not so many in the second economy. Because at the end of the day, Nancy, we can be as wealthy as we want in our countries, whether it's Nigeria or Namibia. But what is the point of being wealthy when I have to hire private security so nobody kidnaps my parents and asks for ransom? If I have to build walls so high to keep my fellow citizens out of my house because they feel, let me break in so I can at least have bread to feed my family. So what is the point of having all these huge capital returns when the social return is so low? You won't have the opportunity to enjoy your money. So I would rather earn lower capital returns, higher social returns, where there's a level of stability, security, and predictability in the country that I live in. I do not want to become a refugee. I do not want to live in a country that's unstable, where I have to go to other countries in order to live life. I'll always be a stranger in somebody else's country. I want to live in my country. So I have to play my role in making sure that the social and economic fundamentals of the country that I live in is sustainable and works for everybody and not just for me.
Your Excellency, it's just a nice place to leave this conversation. I wish I could continue. You know, you're such a delight to speak with. I wish I can have you on my TV show live one day in Nigeria. Thank you very much, Ma'am. I appreciate
Excellent.
you.
Thank you very much.
Extend our greetings to His Excellency. We hope to have you one
will.
of these days open the Congress for us. Let's work for it next year. Bet you he can open for us. It'll be nice to have him open.
I love your spirit, your optimism, and your never say die attitude. I love it.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All
With
right.
support from people like you, the sky is our limit. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thanks, Nancy.
I love you, ma'am. Take care. Take care.
I love you too. Bye. God bless.
Bye. Bye.